Hi, I'm Alexandria Decker, and I'm going to be explaining and analyzing Chapter 4 of Borderlands by Gloria and Zaldua. So this chapter kind of strays off into real-life experience of Gloria and kind of dives into her mind. So I'm going to try my best to explain how I perceive this chapter, and during my presentation, I'd like you all to think of how you perceived it as well and kind of how it compares to what I thought about it and maybe experiences that relate to you or just how we all thought of this chapter individually. So the first part of this chapter is called Clashes with the Soul, or that is the translation into English. So it starts off by talking about Gloria's childhood and basically one of the first beliefs her mother put onto her, or kind of something that was the base of a lot of things throughout her life, or what she's going to continue to talk about throughout this chapter. So, it doesn't say how old she was, but I believe she was very young when her father had passed away. And after this, her mother began to put blankets all over the mirrors, and she claimed she didn't exactly know why she was doing this, but it's kind of a belief that a mirror is a door in which the soul may pass, basically, to the other side. So, Gloria's mother didn't want either of them to accidentally follow their father to the other side. So, she'll talk about this more throughout the chapter, but, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this. I think this is correct. Coatlicue. She is the goddess who is both the creator and destroyer, and she's basically who has the control over the souls and their passing to the other side. And Gloria explains that with this certain gaze in the mirror, you can become, or you'll be overcome by Coatlicue, and her power will scrutinize and judge you and just kind of take over your mind and soul. Gloria explains that it's kind of a paralyzing feeling and being possessed, basically, by her power. So that's basically what her mother wanted to avoid, is her or Gloria being possessed or having their souls taken from them and passing to the other side, especially in such a vulnerable time in their life for their father to be, or for Gloria's father to have passed. So Gloria goes on to say that she was 2 or 3 years old when she was first possessed by Coatlicue, and she knew from then on that something was basically wrong with her. She considered it a terrible secret, or a secret sin, or I believe she also says the mark of the beast. So it was just a part of herself that she was kind of ashamed of and she was scared of. She thought, something had to be wrong with her, and she found shame in this part of herself. She said that she couldn't trust her inner self, and this inner self was basically her dark Indian self with these beliefs. And she was just scared of it. She felt alienated from the rest of the world, and she had no way of hiding it. She just felt vulnerable. She said she hid from it as long as she could, but that only left her being able to be sucked into this abyss in the black obsidian mirror, she says. So ever since she was little, or at the first half of her life, she began to attack herself for these things, even though she couldn't really control them. She used all of her defense mechanisms to escape this agony she felt and this depression. She disowned the parts of herself that others rejected or just saw an evil in, kind of. And I wrote down this quote here. It says, "If we can't see the face of fear in the mirror, then fear must not be there." So this kind of goes off of Gloria saying that she just wanted to hide this part of herself and she was scared, so she just pretended it wasn't there, and she just tried to distract herself through other things. And she goes on to say that her and kind of a universal experience with Chicanos and Mexicans, they just blame themselves and hate themselves for being different and having these different feelings, and they'll go their whole lives believing that something's fundamentally wrong with them. And they'll try to distract themselves through things like drinking, smoking, drugs, and even harmful friends, and it just becomes an obsession or addiction to pretend like you don't have this other side of you. You know, like Gloria just wanted to ignore the fear she had for this face in the mirror, or this fear that she had for Coatlicue. So she found other things to occupy her mind on, which obviously weren't very good things. And I believe she goes on to say that this is again when you will be taken over by Coatlicue, is when you're in a bad state of mind, or you're not really moving forward in your life or in your conscience, so you're kind of stuck or being held back by these bad, harmful things that you're trying to distract yourself with. And that's when you'll be possessed by her again. And Gloria explains that it is like a very fearful experience, which is obviously why she's trying to escape it. But at the same time, I think she's starting to realize, or she explains, that the Coatlicue state is a survival mechanism of the soul. So she basically says that Coatlicue kind of brings you back to reality, and that's when she'll take over your psyche again and helps you process these changes in life or these problems. And even though it's kind of scary, it brings you back to who you are, or creates this kind of strong base for you as a person. So, like she said, it's a survival mechanism of the soul to kind of bring you back to a good place. So she kind of explains more about the culture and beliefs and how Coatlicue is overall represented. So Coatlicue is the goddess of birth and death, and she both gives life and takes away life. So at the beginning, Gloria kind of explains that she's this monstrous figure, and she's just overall scary and, not a very trustworthy looking monster, but overall she is a goddess, and she kind of compares her appearance as life in death, as well as the death in life. And she also says that Coatlicue wears this necklace, and I added a picture here of it, and it has these open hands and with human hearts, and in the middle that's a human skull. So the open hands represent the act of giving life, and the hearts represent the suffering of humans and their overall struggle for existence. And the skull in the middle represents life and death as a single process. So Coatlicue is kind of seen as evil, even though, or a balance of good and evil. So Coatlicue kind of finds a purpose in the souls of people, and when pain and suffering and death kind of become inevitable, that's when she lures this person away. Because basically when we're not at our, or living up to our potentials, and it basically means that we're impeding on the evolution of the soul, and it's too draining to keep us on earth as a living being. So Coatlicue kind of is basically all about the soul and who you are, and if you just stay in this set or certain state of mind and you're not really evolving as a person or with morals in your soul, that's basically when she takes you away. So I don't know if you could read this if my picture's kind of on the top, but one of the last parts of it says that the Coatlicue state is a prelude to crossing. So this is basically one of the reasons that Gloria at first kind of thinks seeing Coatlicue and seeing her gaze is a bad thing, is because it's crossing over. And the same thing with her mother putting the blankets over the mirror is because she doesn't want one of them to accidentally cross over and have this gaze with Coatlicue. But basically this thought and refusal to gaze with Coatlicue, or like be in the Coatlicue state as she says it, is what brings her on once again. You know, this resistance and refusal to know the truth about herself and her inner self, or like just becoming aware of that part, is what brings her about again. And every increment of consciousness is a crossing. So every moment or every little bit more aware Gloria becomes of herself and the things she goes through, it's a crossing. So it kind of talks about the dualism of light and dark, and darkness is considered negative and evil forces. And she kind of talks about, or relates that to her Chicano culture again, saying, you know, darkness is considered negative and evil, and that's always identified with dark-skinned people as well. So at the end, Gloria really reflects on the first part of her life and how she just kind of learned to rule herself and her emotions. She explains that she realized that there's a greater power than the conscience, and that is basically the Coatlicue within her. And she just goes on to explain that the presence never leaves her and she's never alone. And she ends the chapter basically saying that she's not afraid anymore. So yeah, I think this chapter just basically was the evolution of her soul and her realization of who she is.